Welcome back to Hardball. Well, there'll be two battles at the Republican 26th primary on gay marriage between those who don't want to talk about it and those who want it to be a litmus test. The Supreme Court's decision on whether same-sex couples have a constitutional right to marry is expected in June, and it could make that fight all the more urgent. Many of the 2016 Republican contenders have said the court's decisions should be respected, or call for respect at least in the debate. But Mike Huckabee of Arkansas will allow for no such positions. He's even threatened to leave the party over the issue. Here he is.
A lot of Republicans, particularly in the establishment and those who live on the either left coast or those who live up in the bubbles of New York and Washington, are convinced that if we don't capitulate on the same-sex marriage issue, and if we don't raise the white flag of surrender and just accept the inevitable, then we're going to be losers. I tell you, Tim, it is the absolute opposite of that. And if the Republicans want to lose guys like me and a whole bunch of still God-fearing, Bible-believing people, go ahead and just abdicate on this issue. And while you're at it, go ahead and say abortion doesn't matter either.
Right. Because
at that point, you lose me. I'm gone.
Right.
I'll become an independent. I'll start finding people that have guts to stand. I'm tired of this.
Well, Governor Huckabee intends to make it impossible, I think, if you hear it there, for Republican presidential candidates to keep the issue of same-sex marriage under the radar. Joining me right now is Gregory Angelo. He's executive director of Log Cabin Republicans, and Tim Head is executive director of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Tim, tell me, what do you think about this issue? The Republicans have had it on their platform. Now you get the sense that people like Jeb Bush would love to finesse away from it. He said, I respect same-sex couples. You've got Chris Christie from Jersey, who probably doesn't want to run on this thing, and Mitt Romney will probably want to run on economic issues. So what happens to the Huckabees? What happens to the Santorums, the Perrys, the Jindals, the Rubios? I think they're all going to be fighting about it.
Well, I do agree that they're going to be talking about it. I'm not exactly sure that they're going to be fighting about it. Now, I think that calling it a dramatic fight is probably a little bit of an embellishment. I do think that it's a lively discussion, but my hope over the next 15 to 18 months is that we can find a way to discuss this without being in each other's throats, both in content as well as in tone.
Well, that's about manners. You think there'll be good manners over there? You think Huckabee sounded like a guy who wants to cool this thing down, or a guy that wants to heat it up? It sounded to me like he wanted to hype it up.
Great question. I don't know the room that he was sitting in when he had that conversation, and I also, obviously I don't speak for Governor Huckabee or any other candidates, but
he was of sound mind and body, I think.
He also recently released a book, as you're probably aware of, and I haven't read the whole book, but excerpts from it, and he actually talks about being for marriage, traditional marriage, biblical marriage. Not necessarily being against same-sex marriage, or at least people that are same-sex attracted.
Well, here he is. Let's listen to him. Let's listen to him right here. Mike Huckabee took a direct shot at Republicans who say they'll abide by the court's decisions on gay marriage, questioning the validity of the court to make such decisions. Here he is. This is pretty strong stuff, by the way.
One thing I am angry about, though, Hugh, is this notion of judicial supremacy, where if the courts make a decision, I hear governors and even some aspirants to the presidency say, well, that's settled, and it's the law of the land. No, it isn't the law of the land.
Would you counsel civil disobedience to county clerks?
Well, the point is, states would be in a position that their legislatures would have to go into session. They would have to create legislation that the governor would sign. If they don't, then there is not same-sex marriage in that state. Now, if the federal courts say, well, you're going to have to do it, well, then you have a confrontation. At that point, somebody has to decide, is the court right? If it is, then the legislation will be passed.
Well, he's saying the Supreme Court doesn't have the right to interpret the Constitution. That's certainly new. Anyway, Meet the Press on Sunday, Chuck Todd followed up and asking him a question about what would he do. Let's listen.
I just want to clarify, are you advocating essentially nullification here by the states if the Supreme Court legalizes same-sex marriage?
I'm advocating an adherence to the Constitution. I'm really saying that there is a process to change the law, and it doesn't just involve one unilateral branch of government.
Here's the question Huckabee raises, which is the whole question of the Supreme Court, and it goes back to the Civil War, of course. I mean, we operate under judicial review. Whatever we like it or not, we say the Supreme Court has to decide what's constitutional or not. We can argue about it. The Supreme Court can change. It has over time with Dred Scott and Brown cases. They change over time. And
Chris, I'll say this.
We accept them in their time. That's how it works.
Right. Log cabin Republicans does prefer legislative solutions as a preference, right? Because it's more rock solid when you pass laws legislatively. Court rulings, whether you support them or don't, or you oppose them, can be overturned, right? This is sort of the danger in using that as your all or nothing strategy. However, just in your last segment, you had Speaker John Boehner saying, well, the House is a branch of the government, a legislative body that should be respected. The Supreme Court is also a branch of government and one that should be respected by Republicans as well as Democrats. And this canard that's getting thrown out there to bring same-sex marriage before legislatures completely disregards the fact that marriage is something that already exists in state legislatures. The courts are looking at the institution of marriage. They're looking at civil marriages, and they're seeing discrimination that exists to committed same-sex couples.
Let me go back to Tim. The problem I think you have from your side is that the courts in each state, these 30-some states, have basically, you're right, they weren't elected, it wasn't a referendum on same-sex. And normally you don't have referendum on rights, by the way. They're interpreted out of the constitutions of those states. And so how do you rectify the fact that all those state courts said that those state constitutions provided for this right? How do you deal with that in each individual state?
The simple fact of the matter, and of course all of us would agree that here we are 200 years into U.S. jurisprudence, and just in the last decade, just over a decade, we've removed the issue of marriage from being a state issue to becoming a federal issue, and so I think
we're headed there. By the way, do you think we are? Do you think the Supreme Court's going to rule that there's a constitutional right to same-sex marriage? Do you think they will?
I think that they certainly have kind of tipped their hand in that direction, probably late summer, maybe early fall.
Tim, but I agree, Tim. We got to shut it off there. I agree with you, Tim. You agree, don't you?
I agree. I would just say, if you want to talk about why things happen so rapidly in the last 10 years, it's because in states like Iowa that started recognizing same-sex marriages in 2009, all these years have gone by. People have seen committed same-sex couples in civil marriage partnerships are no threat to them.
And you know what else has changed? Your group, the log cabins that didn't push marriage years ago, and I used to speak to you guys, you've changed. The country's changed. The country accepts the right. There's so many people who are born gay. They respect those people that God made. That's what's going on here. It ain't complicated. Thank you, Gregory, Angelo, and thank you, Tim Head. It's a difficult argument. I don't think all states can have their own situations. You'll have custody battles. You have rights of battles over Social Security, everything, if you let that happen. Up next, Bill Clinton proposed a new title for himself in the event, which is probable, in fact, clearly plausible, that his wife becomes president. That's coming up in a sideshow.